Dad loved going to Disney World.
Yes.
It was like a week and he could take a break from the office because he was 24/7 outside of that as the principal.
One of the quotes I share with our players is, "True heroes don't wear capes." That kind of pertains to this whole subject.
This can develop into one of the great rivalries in all of college football. Nebraska and Iowa, two similar programs, similar styles.
Iowa and Nebraska, they rarely competed against one another until Nebraska joined the Big Ten in 2011. I was at the very first press conference to announce the Heroes game. This is a game that alternates every year between Nebraska and Iowa, and it's become a Black Friday tradition. There was a trophy associated, which of course is a symbol of victory, but there was really no history behind that. However, the Heroes game concept was unique, and that was to honor a citizen from each state, from Nebraska and from Iowa, who performs heroic tasks in important situations.
He coached me in a lot of youth sports, and he liked to think he could coach quarterback. And I played quarterback, so he gave me a lot of tips. I'm like, I don't know if that's right, Dad, but when you're 10 years old, you don't know any better.
The Heroes always are nominated by the general public. This year, there were dozens, if not hundreds, of requests for former Perry principal Dan Marburger.
Dan and I grew up in eastern Iowa, and it was just always the Hawkeyes. We had 2 season tickets, so Dan and I would get to the stadium 90 minutes before game time. If we were not in the stadium when the first person came out on the field, we were late to the game. That's all there was to it.
He really appreciated the big guys, up front making those holes. He always liked to talk about the gaps they were creating for the running backs and stuff.
Dan came out to Perry as the assistant principal. At the end of '97, Dan was selected as the high school principal.
We just grew up in the high school. Even when it was the middle school, those people were just our second family.
He always thought it was funny to come on the intercom and say, Seth, please report to the principal's office. It's a small enough school, everybody knows that my dad is the principal, so he thought he was hilarious every time he did it. And now with everything that's happened, I appreciate it a lot more because, there's just more opportunities to see my dad that I don't have now. On January 2nd, my dad and I had taken a trip down to Kansas City. We had to go pick something up, so it was just my dad and I, and we talked about school and what do you do if there's a shooter. My dad just said, well, you've got to do your job. Protect the kids.
It was early in the morning. It was the first day of second semester. Heard some odd sounds that at the time I didn't put together was gunshots. Unfortunately, we had an active shooter that day that shot and killed the middle school student. A few other people along the way were injured. Also shot Mr. Marburger.
So I got a phone call from our middle school principal, and he said that Dan had been injured. Numerous shots taken. We were at the hospital, and some higher up law enforcement agents Came to the hospital and they just said, we need to talk to Dan. I need to shake the hand of the man that did what your husband did today.
He called the shooter by name repeatedly. Don't do it. Let's talk. And each time Principal Marburger called that name out and diverted that attention, it bought those students another 2 seconds, another 3 seconds.
Every second that you can distract a shooter, draw their attention away, every second that you can do that will save lives. That was the plan for Dan. Interact and move towards and engage. It's so hard to think about, like, his thoughts and, you know, the fear that he had to have, and then the shooting happened on January 4th, and we lost Dan the morning of January 14th.
Mom's been really good. She just keeps reminding me on my tough days, you know, Dad would not have made those decisions or done those things if he knew it was going to destroy his own family. So he knew we would be strong enough to carry on without him and live a life that he would be proud of.
Dan did what he was afraid he wouldn't be able to do. You know, we potentially could have lost a lot of kids, and then family trees lose branches. It's pretty amazing that the kids and I got to be a piece of his life for as long as we got to be a piece of his life.
Your heart goes out to anybody involved in the whole thing, every student, every parent, everybody in the community. So to have his family here kind of puts things in perspective. Sports aren't life and death, and I think we all could use that reminder every now and then. There are a lot bigger things.
To be selected as the hero of the Iowa-Nebraska Heroes game, Dan would be very honored for his name to be there forever. But I don't know that he would acknowledge that what he did was heroic that day.
You would think there was somebody more deserving. I think he would tell him to look again, look for somebody else. We talked about that offensive lineman mentality. It's the same way. He doesn't like to be the center of attention. In his mind, I think he just did his job.
This week's game against Nebraska, the Heroes game, for us, it's a real honor to be able to honor the memory of Dan Marburger and his family.
All right, everybody look here.
You talk about true heroes, and we talk about that term with sports. This really puts it in perspective. He is certainly, every sense of the word, a true hero. So it's really an honor for us to salute him.
This year, the Heroes game, for the first time, it's going to be a night kickoff.
It's Iowa-Nebraska. It's Senior Day, the Heroes game, honoring the Marburger family with the Heroes Trophy.
Dan and I, we both really enjoyed the night games. They'd get really late because we'd never, you know, we'd always drive home, but it's just such a different atmosphere when those lights are on.
And the Marburger family being introduced down at center field.
Please welcome Elizabeth Marburger and their children, Hannah, Seth, Claire, Grace, and Ainsley of Perry, Iowa.
Dan Marburger lost his life last January in that terrible campus shooting over at Perry High School and Middle School. Dan lost his life. He died 10 days after he was critically wounded. Great hand for both citizen heroes from Iowa and Nebraska. Congratulations to both families under tragic and near tragic circumstances.
You know, when thousands of people stand and cheer for your husband and what he did, it's pretty emotional. You can't keep that in check. And I don't know, it's beyond words what happened here today.
Boy, oh boy, you talk about pressure. Here we go, timeout over. The game comes down to this 53-yard field goal attempt by Drew Stevens. The snap, the kick is on the way. It is good. Iowa wins it 13-10.
Marburger magic right there, brother.
Amazing.